Susan Hume from the BBC.
Hello, over here.
Hello. Okay.
You talk a lot about British-born workers. Isn't it going to be difficult to distinguish between British-born workers and other British citizens? And doesn't that rather take the power away from local authorities to make the right decisions for their area? And just on another matter, if I might, this dreadful crash on the A66, which you mentioned, do you think social media companies do need to do more to tackle some of the content on their sites?
Yeah, look, Susan, dealing with your first point first, I think it's pretty clear, actually, and as I said in my remarks, that the country and local authorities should be focusing on British-born citizens, and we just feel that's the right thing to do. Now, people will disagree with us. That's fine. That's part of a healthy, democratic debate. But we've got the courage to say that's where the priorities should start. And it's based on suitability. It's based on setting an example. It's based on being part of your community and also looking after your homes in the right way. So by British-born workers, it is setting the example, and we think it's the appropriate place to start. And look, some people will say, well, those who are here on indefinite leave to remain, who've been here a long time, we understand that, but we've got a housing crisis. And I just can't think of another country elsewhere where you just rock up and expect the local taxpayer to fund a significant part of your housing. It's just about fairness and about choices, and politics is about choices. Do you want to pick up the point about the crash?
Yeah, incredibly sad news, and happens all too often. And I think you're right, the social media companies have a big role to play in this. We see the TikTok videos, we see people airing their crimes, if you like, on social media. Young men joyriding, committing crimes. We see it far too often, and I think some of the social media companies have got a lot to answer for. They once you click on these videos, it automatically saves your footprint, if you like, and immediately other the same sort of videos crop up when you're scrolling through. So they have got a huge responsibility, social media companies have. They are encouraging, I think, sometimes this sort of behaviour, making it almost fashionable, and it's not. It ends up with horrific consequences. But I just touch on what Richard said previously about social housing, council housing. When young British workers, young British people go to work and work hard all week and pay their taxes and think to themselves they will never, ever be able to have a council house or have that right to buy like their parents or grandparents had, then that's totally unfair. That's wrong, and we're going to right that wrong. Next one is Keith Bayes, GB News.
Keith Bayes, GB News. Under your proposals, what happens to the child of a British soldier born overseas? Would they go to the back of the housing queue? No. More broadly, Labour has said your policy is unserious and unworkable. Is it? And if foreign nationals are to be evicted from social housing, as you previously said, where do you expect them to go? Thank you.
So pick up your first point with regard to British children born overseas. For example, if servicemen, they would be also at the front of the queue, along with young British workers. And, sorry, the second part of your question with regard to the Labour Party. I mean, come on, seriously? The reality is this Labour government, you talk about serious, they've set a big ambitious target. They'll be lucky to get to half of that. And I'm just going to put my track record out there. Yeah. I've built thousands of homes. How many has Angela built? She bought a council house. She made a lot of profit. So there's a massive difference. This is workable, it's doable, and I've shown how it's fundable. And it's set out in the document. And I think this is of a scale and ambition that we haven't seen for many, many years. So in terms of serious, yeah, I'm deadly serious.
Ben Block, Sky News.
Good morning. Ben Block, Sky News. You say you're going to designate marriage as a core allocation factor in social housing. It's nicely bolded in your document here. So what we wanted to ask is, sort of, what's your message to single parents? Are they less worthy of help than a married couple with children, for example? And just if I may, we haven't seen Nigel Farage in a few days since his big win in Clacton. Is he sort of well rested? Are we going to see him quite soon?
So, look, with regard to marriage is a great thing. And in a sense, when people get married, we all hope that it's going to be for life. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it doesn't work out. But I don't think it's wrong to be ambitious and to promote marriage. And that's the right thing to do in our judgment. So that's why we've made that decision. With regard to Nigel, he's on great form. But on the one hand, you complain that it's a one-man band when Nigel's here, and then you complain when he's not here. So we can't win. But you've got the chairman here, you've got the deputy leader here, you've got a serious policy, and you've heard from Robert last week, you've heard from Suella, and what that shows is we've got a broad team covering a range of really important issues: welfare, apprenticeships, construction, building homes. To repeat the previous point, we're deadly serious.
Talk about some single parents. What's your message to them, knowing LGBT priorities?
Yeah, look, I mean, in a sense, young British single parents will also be right at the head of the queue, as opposed to those from overseas. That's where we're at. And let's not forget veterans. British veterans who've served their country, done the right thing. Again, we have a scandal in this country where too many of them are being allowed to fall through the cracks. And we need to do much, much better. And one of the key things we constantly hear about is the lack of housing for veterans. And one of the opportunities, which we're talking about in various places, is actually veterans' villages. And I was just with some veterans actually just at the weekend. And I think we all underestimate the devastating effect that service can have on those who serve this country, and the importance that we look after them better, as we see elsewhere, for example, in the United States.
I think we have another scandal as well, Richard, in this country, in that British couples are not having as many children as they used to. And this, I firmly believe, and I know Richard does, that this new housing policy, if we can get young British workers into housing, they're more likely to start a family and end this scandal. And it is a scandal. I see it in my own village, where my own school now has got school places spare, and they're really struggling through the pupil premium to keep that school properly funded. We need more babies in this country. We need more children. And this new policy, when we get in government, will encourage young couples to have more children. I'm absolutely convinced on that note. Next one is Carrie Davis, ITV.
Sorry, one sec. You say this about prioritising British-born workers. So, would a working foreign national with a family who is here legally, is a citizen, pays their taxes, and has been here for decades, but who cannot afford open market property, lose their home in favour of giving it to a British-born single person who is unemployed? If so, where does that foreign national worker and their family go? And temporary accommodation comes at a significant cost to local authorities, and you're talking about a very sudden, drastic increase in demand.
Well, first of all, there'll be a grace period, and those citizens that you mentioned, they're probably here on indefinite leave to remain. As I said earlier, that is different to British-born people. The role of the government is to look after British citizens, and what we're motivating people back into work. That's what our welfare policy last week is about. That's what this policy is about. And young people who, as soon as they come into the world of work, they need to find work. And, of course, there will be moments, as you infer, where someone has been working and then may lose their job for whatever reason, and hopefully then is progressing back into work with whatever support programmes may be required. But fundamentally, yes, our priority is British-born citizens. And I repeat the point I made during my remarks. The idea that, that people can come from overseas and think that they should live in a country and get heavily subsidised by the local taxpayers of that country it's a position to have. We just think it's the wrong position.
I just add that we make no apologies for putting British-born people first. Next one is Amelia Jenner from Channel 4 News.
Amelia Jenner from Channel 4 News. We haven't heard from Nigel Farage since his by-election win. Is he in hiding? And has the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner interviewed him yet over the undeclared £5 million gift from a Thai-based crypto billionaire?
Nigel, I think, is 62. I'm not sure he's ever been in hiding. He's always on good form, and you'll see plenty of him if you come to party conference. But I do think that, I just repeat the point, we are a broad team with a range of expertise, as you're hearing about today, and Nigel specifically gave us these tasks, myself, spokesman for business, trade, energy, including housing, so that we can get stuck into some detail. And that's the thing. But with regard to the Standards Commissioner, we're getting to know him for a variety of reasons. That's the nature of it. With regard to timing on that, that's between Nigel and the Commissioner. There are, of course, quite strict rules around who can say what about when with the Commissioner, so we have to leave it at that.
OK, can we have a serious question this time? Bethany Dawson, LBC.
Bethany Dawson, LBC. People are under 35 are pushing back having children because at least partly they can't afford it.
Yeah.
As you said, you want to encourage more people to have children and get married. What more will you do to encourage this? And if I may, you say that housing secretaries gone by didn't know what they were doing. Does that include former housing secretary and now Reform UK economic spokesperson, Robert Jenrick? Thank you.
Shall I pick up the second point? Yeah. Look, the reality is, I'm a home builder. I've been a house builder, and so I'm very proud of that record. I know that actually Robert tried to get a number of things done, changing policy, but was constantly pushed back by the civil servants in his department, and he's talked to me specifically about that. We're going to do things differently because we've got that extra level of conviction, experience, and a can-do attitude, and that's why this is different. So yeah, we're bullish, we're optimistic.
Yeah, and this is also on the back of what Suella announced just a few days ago about the apprenticeship scheme. It's about getting young British people back into work, highly skilled jobs to earn good money in places like Ashfield, where I live. And on the back of that, we can help put them get their foot on the housing ladder. So it has to be a win-win for young British people. At the moment, we've got over 1 million young British people who's out of work, not in employment, not in training. We've got to stop that. It's the young British people in our country that go to work, that pay the taxes, that pay for people like me in a few years' time, and I'm on state pension. So we have to look after our young people, get the alarm clock generation back, give them hope, give them that aspiration like I had when I left school.
And actually, apprenticeships in the world of construction, people might say, yeah, but can you build them because there's a shortage of labour? Well, that's why we're so focused on apprenticeships, and there's nothing better. The press conference we had on Thursday was at a painting and decorating company that had grown from nothing, that employs a number of apprenticeships. It's a great route for young people after GCSEs, getting stuck into the world of work. And I speak from personal experience. There is nothing more satisfying than actually building things.
Sophie Church, Daily Mail.
Hi, thank you both. The Prime Minister is in Ukraine today with President Zelensky. Do you agree with him handing over the blueprint for long-range cruise missiles?
Oh, God, what's that got to do with this?
Yeah, look, the Prime Minister is doing the right thing on his first overseas visit, and we should continue to support Ukraine in doing an incredible job in pushing Russia back. And I was there 2.5 years ago, I think it was, and funny enough, I met a number of the drone manufacturers at the time, and I asked the question about drone technology and the pace of it. And we've seen since how that has become so extraordinary. Back then, they didn't know where it'd be like in 6 or 12 months' time. So with all this technology, the Ukrainian brave soldiers, armed forces are doing an incredible job against the aggression of Russia.
Aaron Newbury, The Express.
Good morning. I'll just come back to one of the earlier points made about temporary housing. What considerations have been made about increase in demand for temporary housing as a result of this policy? And I noticed in your document you said that the social housing tenancies will be fixed term and subject to review of the conditions at the end of that fixed term. So if the married couple occupying that home are part of the 42% of marriages that end in divorce, will they be deprived of their home as well? And finally, why should the 70% of under 35s who choose not to get married subsidise the living of the 30% that do?
I go back to one of the points you made. There's about 5, I think, there. But after the Second World War, when the Labour government built council houses on an industrial scale, as Richard rightly said, the allocation was based on suitability. And if you go back in time and look what actually happened then, the people that rented council houses had to be married under a Labour socialist government. They had to look after their property. They had to keep it well maintained, the gardens done and decorated. And they were inspected on a regular basis by officers from the council. And they had a couple of chances, really. If your house was falling into disrepair and you wasn't looking after it properly, the council officers would come around, give you a little bit of a ticking off, and then give you some encouragement and some coaching on how to keep your property, your taxpayer-funded, subsidised property, up to a reasonable standard. If after that you didn't keep it up to a reasonable standard, you're out. And they gave it to another couple who would look after their property. Couples like my grandma and granddad, who my granddad served in the war, came back wanting, homes fit for heroes, and he got his first council house in 1949. In Sutton, Ashfield, and he lived there till the day he died, over 50 years. And we see it in my community and all around the country. Older people that can remember when council houses were distributed or allocated on suitability, they looked after their properties, and they should look after them because we all pay for them.
Yeah, and it is right. There should be a reward for looking after property properly and setting a good example. It's how communities build and develop and knit together. So, we're absolutely rock solid behind that.
Okay, next one is Tom Scottson, The Sun.
Thank you both. Just on the married couples question, how would a council determine whether a marriage is genuine, for example? And is this part of a policy that you're announcing that's encouraging people to get married? And a second one, if I may, this is on Lee's point right at the start. It was on social media and TikTok, encouraging people to drive the wrong way in these dangerous driving. What would reform do to kind of discourage this sort of behaviour from social media companies? Would it slap large fines or potentially ban operations within the country?
I think personally, and this is not reform policy yet, but personally I think the only way you're going to stop these social media companies from allowing these outrageous posts to be put on their platforms is huge fines. I think there's a case going off in America at the moment, in the social media case, where families are taking, I think it's Facebook, Meta, to court over this type of thing. So the only way you're going to stop it is by hitting them, I believe, strongly in the pocket. Richard.
Yeah, look, with regard to marriage is a great thing. I'm getting married later this year.
You here?
Again. Again, thank you. Look, we're going to be optimistic that the marriages are genuine. I think that's the right thing to do. We're a party of optimists, a party of hope. So that's our thought on that.
Yeah.
Where have we got to now? Financial Times.
Financial Times, David Shepherd.
Hi, David Shepherd from the Financial Times. On the funding through the local government pension funds, what would you say to people whose pensions and retirement is heavily linked to these funds about having potentially 5% of all those assets invested in a as yet unproven scheme?
Yeah, so what I have said before, and I'll say again at conference, is these local government pension funds, there's 97 of them, they're all defined benefits. The better they perform and the lower the cost of running those funds, then the benefit of that accrues to the council taxpayer. They're being badly managed, they're being overcharged by about £2 billion a year by vested interests of city investment managers that read your newspaper, and I'm calling time on this. It's a rip-off. And I'm sick and tired of it. And actually, when you go to all of the regions of these funds, local taxpayers want more affordable social housing in their area. So I think they would hugely support that. And if they're well built, if they're well managed, then it can be a great asset for the British Sovereign Wealth Fund to be invested in. And I just make this point. This could be the 7th or 8th largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. And we look enviously at Norway, we look enviously at the Singaporean Sovereign Wealth Fund. With proper vision, proper ambition, we can have the same. And we absolutely should, run by competent, good people who deliver better returns and stop the taxpayer being ripped off.
Will Hazel, the I-Paper.
Thank you very much. Richard, in terms of prioritising British-born people for social housing, do you think there's any impediments in the current legal system which you'll have to kind of repeal to make that happen? Do you think it's something which we could do today, or do you think you're going to have to do stuff like repealing the Equality Act, which I know you're already committed to, but do you think you're going to have to kind of change legislation to do that? If I could just ask one other question. You'll both know there's been some criticism in recent days of Zia Youssef, including from people within Reform Party. People think that comments like calling Ben Wallace a traitor, a person who served in Northern Ireland, was not a good look for the party. Do you think he should perhaps be spending a little less time on social media?
Look, with regard to the first point about priorities, yes, there are some technicalities around the Human Rights Act and the Equalities Act, but as you know, we have committed to repeal the Human Rights Act. The Equalities Act, well-intentioned, has actually taken us into the wrong place. So there is some change within that, but equally there's much that can be done and that should be done currently, and the current rules are not being properly applied by many of the housing authorities and the associations. So that's the point on that. Look, with regard to Zia, we're all passionate. Zia's passionate, and we all, frankly, are furious at how the previous Conservative government, they let us all down, because they said they were going to reduce immigration numbers. They didn't. They opened the doors, they allowed the Boris wave, and part of the problems around the social housing issues that we're now talking about is because of the Boris wave. And that's why it's quite right to highlight, unless we deal with indefinite leave to remain, then the vast majority of that wave could then apply for ILR and then apply for all sorts of additional benefits, including housing, that would literally bankrupt the country. So Zia's on great form, we're on great form, we're looking forward to conference, and as I tweeted out a couple of days ago, I think the summer heat may have got to a few journalists.
Yeah, and just on the Zia point, Richard, I think Zia is probably one of our best communicators in Reform UK, very popular with the membership, and a little bit of advice to anybody. If you don't like what Zia says, then just scroll by. It's really simple. Sophie Huskinson, the Daily Mirror.
Thank you. I have a question for each of you. So, Richard, you said you don't think it's wrong to promote marriage and sometimes it doesn't work out. Under your plans, will victims of domestic abuse who maybe have to escape an abusive marriage, or people whose husband or wife dies, be protected, or will they go to the back of the queue because they're no longer married? And then, Lee, if I could just ask, you said about fines for social media companies, the way that these are currently brought is under the Online Safety Act. Reform wants to scrap that. So how will you bring fines? And equally, basically you say, or you could just scroll past Zia's tweets if you don't like them. Is that the kind of advice that you'd also give to people if they're seeing dangerous content on social media, that it's on the person to scroll past?
On your second point, yes. If you don't like what any of us have to say on social media, you don't have to follow us. You don't have to read our comments. Just scroll on by and go and listen to somebody else. With regard to the Online Safety Act, we want something much, it's a well-intentioned act, don't get me wrong, but we want something much more robust and stronger to stop these horrific incidents happening in the future. Now, I do personally think, and it is something we're looking at, is that the only way you're going to hit these big tech companies is by huge fines. It's as simple as that. Hit them in the pocket, Richard.
And Sophie, with regard to the point about domestic abuse, of course, they are protected and would remain protected. And we're absolutely paramount at, and that's crystal clear.
Kieran Stacey, Guardian.
Thank you very much, Kieran Stacey from The Guardian. Can I just check a couple of details on your policy? First of all, can you confirm that under this policy, somebody who was born abroad but came to the UK as a child, has lived here almost all their life and is a citizen, would be lower down the priority list? And can I also ask what this means for housing associations? Because you're putting quite a lot of stock by what they can do under this policy. Allowing them to borrow more doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be able to get more back in rent, because rent will still be capped. And if they then go into default, if the banks have those assets listed at market value on the private sector, as I think is your policy, they'll have to sell those as private market rented accommodation. That might mean a net loss of social housing, not a gain. Can you answer that as well, please?
Well, actually, the housing associations that I talk to and meet, actually it's the opposite. They desperately want more financial resource in order to build and manage more. And the top 100 own about 80% of all of the affordable housing. And they actually, with that little bit of extra leverage, they can do what they're set up to do and what they want to do. And it's a shame at the moment that they're being, in a sense, they're being restricted. Although the government says money is available, the truth is it's not getting to the housing associations. And as I say, the ones I've spoken to, they want to do more. Many of them have got great experience in delivering, and I believe with joint ventures that can absolutely be achieved. And the numbers set out, but there is plenty of cover in order to ensure that they can more than meet the covenants. There is very modest leverage at the moment, and with just a modest increase, this is the right thing to do. So we're very confident that it works, and that it will lead to these homes being built. And as you'll hear from me next week, the more of those that are built on brownfield sites, rebuilding, regenerating, re-energising our town centres, the better.
And on your first point, I'll just go back to what we've both previously said. We have no problem in putting British-born people first. Next question, Amy Gibbons, Telegraph.
Thank you very much. Just 2 points of clarification quickly. You've said you would prioritise married couples. Can I ask what would happen to people in civil partnerships? Would they also qualify for priority access? And on what you both said a moment ago about requiring people to keep their properties well maintained, what do you mean by keeping gardens presentable? Will people be kicked out of social housing if they don't mow their lawn, for example? And then very briefly on a different topic, can I ask whether you think taxpayers should fund Harry and Meghan's security when they return to the UK, as Labour MPs have suggested? Thank you.
I'll go back to the talking about social housing in disrepair or not being looked after properly. What is wrong with expecting people who live in subsidised housing, paid for, subsidised by the hard-working British taxpayer? What is wrong with expecting them to keep their house to a reasonable standard? We see it on the new house builds now, where probably 10% of the new houses are given to housing associations. And it is a big problem for me in my community when they don't allocate these houses on a sensitive let. We see all sorts of people moving into these brand new houses and creating mayhem and disturbances on these brand new housing estates. And the hard-working British taxpayer, the alarm clock people who get up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, go to work and see the house next door with 4 foot of weeds, dustbin not been emptied for 3 weeks and a waft of weed coming out the window. It's not acceptable. They expect their taxes to go to decent people who's prepared to get up in the morning. Richard.
With regard to civil partnerships, of course those would qualify as well. And with regard to Harry and Meghan, frankly, we've all got better, more important things to worry about, which is, for example, building these homes. So that's what we're interested in.
Final question. Daisy Eastlake, The Times.
Thank you, Daisy Eastlake from The Times. Can I ask, what would happen to a family where one parent is British, but the other is, say, on indefinite leave to remain, and they have 2 British-born children? Where would they fall in the housing queue? And how do you avoid punishing, a British person who marries somebody from abroad and has children, sets that life up? And just a last one on temporary accommodation, as was mentioned earlier. If people who are at risk of, or who are out of work are at the bottom of the social housing queue, there's a much higher chance that they will be put into temporary accommodation because councils have a legal responsibility to house these people. Temporary accommodation is often twice the price. What do you think should be done about that? Should councils be legally required to house these people for a much more expensive rate? Thank you.
So with regard to your first question, they qualify alongside. With regard to the second point, do you want to pick up the...
Yeah, well, your second point was about... can you just repeat your second point again?
So temporary accommodation, which is often more expensive than social housing, councils are legally required to house people who are at risk of homelessness.
No, they're not. They're only legally required to put people in temporary accommodation who are in priority need. And there's a list of people in priority needs. It could be pensioners, it could be disabled people, pregnant women, and women with children. If you're a normal single person in this country with none of those descriptors, then you have absolutely no chance of ever securing temporary accommodation. They will push you into private accommodation or into private hostels.
But I also come back to the whole point of this press conference is we've got a shortage of accommodation. And governments have talked about it. They've not actually done the business and built more affordable housing. The more we build, and the better people look after it, and the better they're incentivised to do a right to buy, which is absolutely vital to improving the way that our streets look, and then actually we'll be in a much better place and there'll be less need for temporary accommodation.
OK, guys, thanks for turning up today.
Thank you very much.
I listened to that. That's been brilliant. Well done, Richard.